Hi, hello, and welcome to the India Hangout. President Obama has revealed and unveiled a new climate change initiative. It talks about reducing CO2 emissions by 32% for power plants by 2030 and bringing and the 32% is really below the 2005 levels. So that's a very interesting target. The big question we are trying to ask and understand is this possible in India at all? Should we be looking at it? Should we be even working towards that? That's the subject for today. I'm joined by two people who are going to help me navigate this. Arunabha Ghosh, CEO of the Council of Energy, Environment and Water, and Daryl DeMonte, Chairman Emeritus of the Forum of Environmental Journalists in India. Gentlemen, thank you very much for both joining us. So, Arunabha, let me start with you. You've just authored a significant report, co-authored a significant report on climate change and what the impact of climate change could be on a whole range of issues affecting our daily lives, including or independently national security. How do you view this whole Obama initiative, and to what extent is this practical in India, and should it be at all something that we should be looking at?
Govind, thanks for having me. I think you asked two questions. Firstly, what do we have to say about the Obama initiative itself, and then can India do the same? I think the first question is the more relevant one, because the India strategy on what is an appropriate low carbon strategy will be slightly different from what's appropriate for the United States. India is doing quite a bit on renewable energy. We are doing quite a bit on energy efficiency, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But I think if you look at this particular plan that President Obama has put out, it's important to understand that it's not a new climate change plan. It's a new plan for reducing emissions from power plants. And why I'm saying this is that it's part of the roadmap that the US would have to get through on to get to its overall targets of emissions reductions that it has set. So from the point of view of the power sector, it's an important plan. The power sector in the United States accounts for 30% of its emissions. It's the biggest share of emissions. But remember, as a result, there's 70% of the economy that's untouched by this plan. Right? So to that extent, what the Obama administration is doing is trying to make 2 points. One, it's a signal to the rest of the world that, in its opinion, it is serious about climate change. It is trying to push the envelope to the extent possible from where the administration sits. But the other bigger message here is really about the domestic political economy. The Obama administration is sending out a clear signal to the fossil fuel industry in the United States that, at least within the power sector, then their days are numbered.
Right. Okay. So, let's address the part about whether, this is feasible and to what extent in India. But let me get a broader sense first from Daryl as well. Daryl, what's your sense? I mean, as Arunabha also pointed out, this is really about the power sector. This is about saying that can US power sector cut emissions, CO2 emissions by 32% up and then the 2005 levels by 2030. So that's a significant move. So is this something that we should be thinking about?
I think we should see very clearly that it's not significant. If you take the total greenhouse gas emissions that the U.S. has committed to, it's only 3% on 2005 levels by 2020. I don't know how this 32% on power will translate. But even if, let us assume, even if it was 32% of greenhouse gas emissions by 2020 on 2005 levels, it hardly you see, Obama has changed the goalpost, because the most proactive bloc in the world is the European Union, which has promised 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. That is 15 years. It brings the target much more ambitious. So I regret to say that if you take the per capita emissions of the United States, there are a few countries which will exceed it, but it's, I forget now, 18 tons per person per year. its footprint as against what India's round of one or what, little over one or little below one. So it's far too little, far too late. But even this is going to be opposed, as we have read by the Republicans, many of whom don't even believe in human-induced climate change.
Right. So, Arnab, let me come back to you. So, if we were to, if we were to sort of break that Obama plan down, what they're saying is four things. I mean, and this is of course something that the states will implement. It's talking about more efficient power plants and therefore efficient coal burning. It's talking about less coal in future and more gas. It's talking about renewable energy as well. As a way to complement total power generation and power output, and that obviously includes wind and solar and so forth. So this is a comprehensive plan, even if it's not sort of as ambitious as Europe, as Daryl pointed out. And while there are debates on India's own per capita emission, which is lower, is this something that we should we be thinking along these lines at all, and do we have targets along these lines at all?
Govind, in terms of the way you've broken it down, it's important to understand that that last bit that you mentioned about the push for renewables, that's what has really got the kind of significant attention. There was a draft plan that was issued a year ago. So this is kind of an updated version. And what the plan says is that 30% increase in the power generation from renewable energy, right? This has had two implications. One is that, of course, the coal sector, the coal power sector, is coming under pressure. But the other issue here is that the natural gas power sector is also coming under pressure. In the earlier version of the plan, natural gas lobby thought that it was tied at the hip with the renewable energy lobby, that these were kind of a larger set of clean energy initiatives. What this plan is trying to do, and as the EPA administrator, the Environment Protection Agency administrator has also said, that they want to make sure that there's an explicit push for renewable energy in this plan. Now, is this applicable in India? The short answer is no. The reason is that what we have in India is not a coal giving way to natural gas, giving way to renewable story, but we have to develop our own appropriate energy mix, which would ideally be cleaner coal combined with renewables, because natural gas is very expensive for India, at least currently. Now, can we reduce emissions from the power sector? Yes, we can. Would it be an emissions intensity reduction, or is it absolute emissions reduction? That is, I would go with the side of emissions intensity reduction, because the total amount of energy supply that we need in the country still has to go up. We are talking about an average Indian consuming just about 800 to 900 units of electricity a year, compared to an average American consuming more than 14,000 units of electricity a year. So we are not at a stage of development where we can say overall emissions can come down in India, but we can certainly make our power plants more efficient, both on the fossil fuel side and also bring in.
So, Arnab, let me put this question to Daryl. Daryl, what I'm trying to get out of this is, while India is obviously has runway ahead in terms of how much it can add to the emission kitty, so to speak, what is the kind of leadership that India can show or should be showing in setting tighter emission targets, whether it's in power or other parts of the sort of energy burning economy?
I'm afraid that the government has not shown any foresight in these climate negotiations. They keep saying that we will not be bullied and stuff like that, which is correct, but that should not detract from the fact that for our own domestic imperatives, we need to do all these things. I mean, you're living, not you, but Arnab, living the most polluted city in the world, and the 13th of the most polluted cities in the world in this country. So we need to get our act together without getting the industrial countries to be putting pressure on us to declare either absolute cuts in emissions or emissions intensity reductions, because they have not put their money and their technology where their mouths are. So India should not be bullied into any such position. But at the very same time, it is entirely in our domestic interest to be taking mitigation and adaptation actions without submitting these to international review, as the Paris talks are heading to, because it's that all these health, the effects of pollutants on agriculture, transport, building, energy, every sector of the economy is already terrible, and we need to do this for our own domestic imperatives.
Arnab, the starting point for this Obama initiative seems to be the acceptance or acknowledgement of three things. One is that it's irreversible and the changes could be permanent. This is not something you can kick down to the next generation and hope that it can fix it. Either, if you don't fix it now, there's some damage caused, and there seems to be an acceptance in that. Second, of course, is the power of regulation to manage this and fix this, and because normally that's where the pushback happens, and if you over-regulate, you can kill industry and so on. So that seems to be the second acknowledgement. Third, of course, is that this is a global problem. My question really again is, to what extent in India do we appreciate and acknowledge the fact that this is irreversible and therefore there could be permanent changes, and therefore whether or not our emissions on a relative basis are lower, we need to do something about it?
Govind, I think that's correct in the sense that in the video that accompanied the announcement of this plan, President Obama makes it very clear that this is no longer something that's going to happen to future generations. This is already happening to us, and this is what we discussed a few weeks ago as well when we brought out the climate risk report. I think that is not something that India disagrees with. In fact, all the analysis is pointing very clearly to India being one of the hardest hit countries, whether it's our food systems, whether it's our water, whether it's our land, and so forth. But the other aspect that you mentioned, that this is a call to the rest of the world to sort of follow suit, that's where I would slightly disagree with you. And I would agree with what Daryl was just saying, because the overall ambition of the United States for emissions reduction is not good enough. What they promised in 2009 to reduce emissions by a certain amount, 17% by 2020, if you take that forward to 2030, if you project that forward, and then you look at what their current commitments are, they're suggesting that they're going to reduce by 26 to 28%, then effectively you are getting a promise by the United States to have lower emissions cuts in future. So you're giving them more time, and yet the overall emissions cuts is lower than what they were earlier promising in 2009. So this power sector plan actually accounts for only 10% of that 26 to 28% reduction, right? So it's, as I said, it's a major marker on that roadmap. But is that roadmap good enough? Unfortunately, it is not. And therefore, what is the lesson for India? The lesson for India is, number one, it needs to, of course, acknowledge the threat of climate change that it's already facing. Number two, it needs to start articulating very clearly what it is already doing. And number three, it needs to be fairly forthright about what it plans to do, and pushing the envelope a little bit more. And of course, we've heard a lot over the past few months about renewable energy and so forth. But the second strategy about the international stage, I think in addition to articulating that India is doing all of this or planning to do all of this, I think India needs to take a leadership in a different way. And that is about bringing together different groups of countries to focus on issues of common concern. While the climate negotiations are appropriately divided between the developed world and the developing world, there are issues that are common to the developed world and the developing world. For instance, decentralized energy. Now, decentralized energy matters to India for the purposes of energy access for the rural poor, for instance, or even the urban elite. But it also matters to a country like Germany, which has massive amounts of rooftop solar power. And it matters to a country like the United States that worries about cyber attacks on its electricity grid and therefore needs decentralized energy as a backup. So why can't India come forward and say, we want to create a global partnership that focuses on energy access and decentralized energy and looks at technologies, business models, financial models. Another area where India can step forward is energy storage research. There are labs in India and outside India working in this area, but we're clearly not investing enough R&D money in this. And that's the holy grail for our transition towards a lower carbon electricity system. So again, we can tie together with developed countries and developing countries to form a global partnership on energy storage. If we could do that for the green revolution, we can do that for energy as well.
Right.
I think if we come forward with these bigger ideas, it's more than just the sum total of India's own actions, but suggesting that India is so serious about climate change that if the rest doesn't lead, India is going to pull them along, not in terms of high targets for emissions reductions, but in many other ways that make sense for us.
Right. So the important thing that, as Arunabh, I think you said, is that we should be owning the action as well as the narrative. And currently, we are sort of weak on both. We've run out of time, unfortunately. Thank you both for joining us and sharing your thoughts on an important issue that we hope to revisit in coming days, which is what is India going to do and what kind of leadership will it take in the larger context of climate change and, of course, ensuring a better quality of life for all of us. Thanks for watching.